Welcome back to Gale Force Winds Season 5.
Well, welcome to a wonderful edition of Gale Force Winds right here in the beautiful city of Budapest, and I want to tell you what a remarkable place this is. We're in a very special location here today, and we'll get into that in the fullness of the conversation. But Judith, I am excited about our next guest. I'm excited about being in this room with our next guest, this building with our next guest. What do you think about what's going to happen here today?
So I'm very excited about this interview because I've known Michael for a year now, and we got to know each other through the chamber. But Michael, why don't you start introducing yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Judith. Thank you both for having me here. I'm Michael Cojocar, and I'm an architect, an entrepreneur, a business owner, and more importantly, I'm the father of 3 very nice young men, my 3 sons who live in Canada at the present time.
Michael, tell us about where you grew up in Canada, how you grew up, and we'll get to how come you wind up here today.
Sure. I'm from Calgary, and I guess I'm a real prairie boy. I grew up around horses, quite I guess uniquely, but I no longer have anything to do with horses. I was born and raised in Calgary. We lived a few years in Ontario. When I was very young, my father went back to university and became a veterinary equine veterinarian, and so my father was a horse doctor, and I lived in suburban Calgary and went through the school system in Calgary.
So did you grow up right downtown Calgary, and how does that play into the horse?
Yeah, no, I grew up in southwest Calgary in the suburbs in the late 1970s. I went to high school in Calgary, and both of my parents were born and raised in Saskatchewan, and my grandfather on my father's side, Mike Cojocar, was one of the most successful thoroughbred racehorse trainers of his era, and so he had a stable of racehorses that he raced. He was a trainer, his horses, other people's horses. And so my father was a horse vet. My uncle was on the Canadian Olympic team in Mexico in 1968 on the equestrian team. And my stepmother was a very successful American equestrian 3-day event rider. So I grew up sort of, like in the horses. Like I used to go down to the barns and clean stalls for my grandfather when I was a kid. But at the same time, I had a normal suburban life, and
that's pretty amazing, right? You're growing up in suburban Calgary, and then you've got this whole other side of your life. What part of Saskatchewan did Mom and Dad come from?
My dad was born and raised in Assiniboia. My grandfather was from Limerick, Saskatchewan, and my mother was born and raised in Prince Albert.
Wow. My dad was born in Assiniboia, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, can't make that up.
They may have known each other.
There you go.
Wow, we'll talk about that one later.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So you're growing up in suburban Calgary there, beautiful city. Great place to live in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got the mountains, you've got a great vibrant city around you. Where did your journey go then? What were your big motivators and influencers back then, aside from horses?
I was, I guess, like any youth, you were just trying to find your path and what do I want to be? As a kid, I wanted to be everything, I'm sure, like everybody else, an astronaut, a race car driver, whatever. So I think I don't know, how old do you need to be when you know what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted to go to university. My father was determined I would not be in the horse industry, and he would do everything he could to push me out of the horse industry and get a real job. And so I hung out with my buddies. We were big skiers. So I was a ski racer for quite a few years and a ski instructor, and off we went to university.
And where was that?
I went 2 years to University of Alberta, right out of university or out of high school, and I had thought I wanted to be a doctor, but I was cured of that very quickly. My mother got me a job in a hospital after first year of university, and that cured me of wanting to do medicine. It hadn't occurred to me that everyone would be ill, that I would have to deal with. It just never occurred to me until I actually worked in a hospital, and that just, I give so much respect to the people who do that, but that was not my environment, and so I took another year of general science, and I decided that architecture was something that was quite interesting to me. Like I just said, you don't know how old you are when you know what you want to do or what you're actually going to do, or how much understanding do you actually have of what it is that you want to do, such as be a doctor. So I decided I wanted to be an architect. I think I also had very little idea of what that actually meant. I would draw some pictures of buildings and people would build them. I guess that's what I would do. And so I went to Montana State University in Bozeman, Montana, and went down to the States. 2 years in Edmonton was enough cold for me because I'm from Calgary.
Right.
And the thought of going to Winnipeg for 5 years was like, yeah, no, I think I'm going to go south and find something warmer. So I went to Montana State and did a 5-year Bachelor of Architecture degree.
Wow. So a mom sent you to the hospital to work. Very wise of her to kind of give you that experiential learning to determine, is this the path that I want, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yet, what was it about architecture that grabbed you? What did you remember that kind of moment in time where you said, wow, this is a cool thing to do?
I think it was just the creative side to it, the creative aspect, and that you would be starting with I mean, as I know now, starting with nothing, and the end product would be a physical object that you could touch, that you would share with people.
And would live on.
And would live on, absolutely.
Do architects think that way, that I'm building something that will live on? Do they think of buildings and things as a legacy?
I mean, I don't really, but I guess probably they do. I don't know. I guess other guys do. Yeah. I mean, you think of it living on in that immediately it becomes a part of the community, right? So the building becomes a part of the neighborhood and part of the community, and it impacts the community in ways that you've designed it to do so.
Right.
Right. So that's its legacy. Its legacy is how does it fit within the community that it's been placed.
Yeah.
That's interesting because we keep talking about it as we're browsing in Budapest, and we see the buildings from different ages and different styles, and we're in awe seeing these. And then always it pops the question in my head: who were these people? Who were the architects of these buildings when there was nothing here And then now we're walking on the street, and then these beautiful buildings surrounding us.
Yeah, yeah, and it's absolutely. I mean, and Budapest, you know, is such a gorgeous city, and the architecture is fantastic. Very unique. It's you'll hear this in other cities too, but you know, this mixture of East and West, yeah, and you have a lot of Central European, Austrian, German influences, because this was part of the Habsburg Empire for many hundreds of years, and then you have these Eastern influences largely brought on by the Hungarians seeking their cultural identity and using symbolism of the Far East and Central Asia and building it into the architecture. So a lot of the buildings, if you look very closely, you see that the decorations are motifs from Central Asia. And these are the 19th century big palatial buildings that you've seen.
But when you went to university in the States, what kind of influence did you have on your work?
It was really a fantastic program in Bozeman, Montana, which is a great ski town in southern Montana, and it's a university town, so the university ruled the roost. But the weakest point was that the university was in the middle of nowhere, and in the first week that I was there, we had, in the architecture school, we had a guest lecturer come from New York City. We had a repeating guest lecture series throughout the year, and Robert Stern was the guest lecturer, who's a very famous New York architect. His peak was in the 70s and 80s. He designed the big hotels in Disney World, you know, with the big duck on the roof. And he came, and the first thing he said was, "You should all drop out of this program. You're never going to get anywhere on earth. You're in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing for you to see here." Yeah, and this was before the internet, so like we were stuck, you know.
Right.
Really, and I'm like, oh, maybe I made a mistake. Jeez. But the director of the school was a fantastic guy, Bob Utzinger, and what he did was, half of the faculty were on 1-year non-renewable contracts. And so there's this total changeover of faculty. And so we had guys from Vienna who wanted to go live in the mountains in the United States for a year and get paid to do so. We had principals from big architectural practices in New York City who wanted to write a book, or their kids had never seen a blade of grass, and so let's go to Montana for a year and go fly fishing. And so we had all these external influences from everywhere through the faculty.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What a visionary model.
Yeah, it was really good. It was the 5th ranked bachelor program in the US at the time. There were 150 bachelor programs.
Wow, that's fascinating that they would do that and bring those thoughts into the classroom.
Yeah.
What a win-win scenario, right? For those visiting professors to experience this part of the world, and for you to tap into their knowledge. That's a very forward-thinking program.
Yeah.
You're lucky to be in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, how from Montana, where did life take you?
Yeah, so from Montana, you know, after 7 years of paying tuition, I was really broke, and so I went back to Calgary, and I immediately got a job. Again, I was quite fortunate, and I got a job in a young firm in Calgary, and there were these two guys that were the principals. You know, I look back at it now, I guess they were like 39 years old. They seemed old to me at the time, but and they had signed a contract to do the expansion and renovation of the Banff Springs Hotel, the Chateau Lake Louise, and the Empress Hotel in Victoria. And so, and I mean, that's not even possible now, right? You know, that CP Hotels would give that size of a contract to these two 39-year-old guys in Calgary. But this is what I started doing. So I started very briefly on the Banff Springs Hotel because it had already run quite far, its program. Like I joined, it had already been in the office for, you know, a year or something. And that was a very large project. It was the expansion of the Banff Springs Hotel to turn the staff housing into guest rooms, and we built a conference center, and we built a large parking garage, and a new staff housing compound. But then I started working on the Chateau Lake Louise, and that was a fast track job, which had to be done before the Olympics. So it was like an 18-month design build contract with PCL, and we added a new wing onto the Chateau, and we built a new lobby structure, and then a large parking garage also to make this forecourt. And that project ran for a couple of years. Then we went on to Victoria, and we did the Empress Hotel. We did the new lobby, which is out in the grass in front of the hotel, and the new vertical circulation. So I just sort of wanted them. We just had these like incredible historical.
I was going to say those are three iconic Canadian historical locations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at this point, you were only an architect, or you also did interior design?
So I was an architect. Yeah. In North America, it's sort of two professions, but in Europe, it's more of one profession.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had interior designers who designed the hotels, and then we were the architects.
So what was next after this? So you got this opportunity so early on in your career. So what could come next?
I do not. So then I took a short break from it because the Olympics were coming, and a friend and I met about 8 months before the Olympics started, and we decided that maybe there was some good opportunity to make some money from the Olympics, and why don't we do that?
Olympics in Vancouver.
In Calgary.
In Calgary.
88, yeah.
88, okay.
Yeah, and so why don't we make some money from the Olympics? And she had a background, she had a clothing company before, and so we decided to make a clothing company and sell a souvenir. We'll make a souvenir shirt for the Olympics, yeah? And her previous company, I think, had made T-shirts, and so we talked about this, and I said, I don't think we want to make a T-shirt. I think if people have enough money to fly to the Olympics and buy tickets in hotel rooms and stuff, then they probably want something more substantial. And so we made this sweatshirt that had flags stitched all over it, and just years, but no Olympic logos or anything, because we didn't want to share the money with the Olympic Committee. and so we made the shirt. It was $120 in 1988, and we did some good product placements before the Olympics started, and we gave it to the Olympic hockey team. They went to Moscow. They won the Izvestia Trophy that year before the Olympics started. So that, you know, this hype was sort of coming because the Olympics is coming, and the Olympics in Canada, and for whatever reason they wore their shirts that we had given them in the gold medal celebration and stuff, and so we did. So we had some good product placement, and we thought we had a pretty good chance at doing really well, but we didn't have any money, and so we knew some of the stockbrokers downtown because we'd sort of gone to high school with them, and so we asked them if they could put some money together, and so we put some money together, and the before the Olympics started, I think we'd sold about 1,200 shirts, and when the day the Olympics started, we had 10,000 shirts in stock, and we ran out of shirts in 9 days.
You're kidding me.
No. And I mean, it was just madness, right? And I left the office one day and I never came back. I went out for lunch and just didn't return. And so that was really fun. This
is what I call true entrepreneurial spirit,
yeah, for sure.
right?
And then people wanted more shirts, and somehow they figured out where Daphne lived, and so they were going to Daphne's house trying to get more shirts, and they were like giving us checks. Can I give you my credit card number? Here's some money. And I mean, it was just insanity, right? And so we said, calm down and just leave us your address, and we'll do a mail out, and we'll mail you details of how, and we'll decide how many more shirts we're going to do.
Amazon.
Exactly. So we did 10,000 more shirts by mail order.
Wow.
And then we were contacted. I was contacted by the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and they said, why don't you come to Seoul? Because at that time, the Winter and the Summer Olympics were in the same year, right?
Right.
And so after some discussions and putting a deal in place, I went to Seoul, and we licensed a company to sell our designs, and we just took a licensing fee from them. We had no chance of manufacturing in Korea,
right. Yeah.
I mean, and I don't know how many shirts they sold, but a lot of shirts. And so that was my break from architecture, and that lasted for maybe a year, and then I went back to the company that I had left at lunch and not come back, and they took me back, and so I went back right back to practicing architecture.
That's quite a little break.
That's a good break.
That's a great little break. What an entrepreneurial journey that must have been.
Yeah, it was really good.
You had no idea that the shirts were going to go with it. They had the term for it now, viral, but you had no idea.
We had a pretty good idea.
Did you?
Yeah. Because, I mean, we had started in September, and we'd sold 1,200 shirts by January. Yeah. Right? And any shirt that we made, they just walked out the door. And we had 2 retailers that we worked with. We also reserved the right to sell the shirts ourselves. Mm-hmm. And we had, I think, 120. You couldn't undercut 120. That was our deal. Right. Nobody gets to undercut anybody else. And it, and Christmas we put another 600 shirts in the stores, and they'd be gone as well. They were gone as well, and we were like, maybe we should.
Good margins on each shirt.
Yeah.
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 That's fantastic.
Student loan. Remember the student loans?
You had to get rid of that student loan.
Get rid of the student
loans.
And
in U.S., they have real big student loans.
Yes. Well, Canadians can. We were out-of-state students.
Oh, were you? Okay.
Yeah. We were not foreign students. We were just out-of-state.
Just out-of-state.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it wasn't that bad.
Right. So from the shirt business, you go back to the architect firm. Mm-hmm. Where does the journey take you? I'm curious to get to the point where Europe liked you.
So we went back to the architecture firm, and through some contacts that had been made while doing the Banff Springs Hotel, the regional vice president for Canadian Pacific Hotels was a Czech guy, and so the principals than me, because I was still pretty young, they became embedded into the Czechoslovakian Canadian business community, and so in 1991 we landed a contract to design a shopping center in Bratislava. and so there was a show of.
That's the same company.
It's the same company.
The same company.
I'm still with the same
started
company.
right after
Yeah.
university.
Yeah. And so there was a show of hands. Who wants to go to Europe and be the project architect for the shopping center? And so I put up my hand, and so I ran the project. So starting in the early 1992, I started traveling back and forth between Calgary and Bratislava, and we had Czechoslovakian technicians in our office by chance who were former Czechoslovakian architects, but they weren't licensed in Canada, and they were architectural technicians in the office. And so together with them, we set up an office in Bratislava to handle this shopping center project. These guys, the developer was from Mississauga, and they had come from Bratislava, and they had done very well in the industrial development sphere in Ontario, and they were successful real estate developers. And so the father wanted to go back to his homeland and build a big shopping center. And so I ended up in Bratislava, and we learned at that point in time that Czechoslovakia wasn't one word, but was two words.
Yeah.
Czech and Slovak.
Right.
So we started the project. We worked on it for about 3 months, and in the office in Bratislava, we had already completed the design in Canada, and we took the design over to Bratislava to do the permit drawings and the construction drawings, and all of a sudden we weren't in Czechoslovakia anymore. We were in the Slovak Republic, and the anchor tenants were like, yeah, gee, I don't know. Why don't you phone us in 2 years? We want to see what happens with this newly created company of Slovakia. But the client was great.
Yeah.
And he said, no problem. You guys just stay there, finish the building permit drawings, get the building permit, make the construction drawings, and we'll be ready. And in 2 years, when the tenants come back, then we'll be ready to go. And so we stayed, and we made the drawings. And so I spent a year in Bratislava doing that. But in the meantime, with the same firm, I was working for this.
Were you back and forth to Canada, or were you living there?
I was back and forth before we sort of handed the project over to the Bratislava office,
okay,
where the local staff needed to draw the drawings in local means and local language, and they couldn't look like Canadian drawings anymore.
Right.
So I was back and forth, and then when we handed the drawings over to Bratislava, then I was basically there.
Right.
And I went home for Christmas and stuff. But
what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was crazy. It was the Wild East, right? It was 1992, and the region had only come out of communism 3 years earlier, and we had an office where we could see the Austrian border crossing. It was like 4 kilometers away, and if the lineup wasn't very long, then somebody would jump up and drive to Austria because we couldn't buy fruits or vegetables in Czechoslovakia or Slovakia out of season. They only had seasonal vegetables. So even in 1992. So if you wanted lettuce, you had to drive to Austria and get your lettuce. And so it was a big transition, and it was very hard, I think, for the average person, for sure. All these big industries closed, and people, lost their jobs, and then the new multinationals came in and sort of lifted the region up. But it was, I remember I lived in a communist panel apartment building, as you've probably seen on the outskirts of the city, and on the 10th floor, the elevator never worked the whole time I lived there, and on the ground floor of this apartment building, there was a grocery store. And of course, I'm from Calgary, and I shop at Safeway, and I know what products look like, and I'm a victim of consumerism, and so these were still the same communist food production companies still existed, right?
Yeah.
And so you would go down to the grocery store, and there'd be a tin, and they'd just say peas on it, and in Slovak, but there'd be no picture of a pea or the sun coming up,
right.
Or someone happily dancing through the peas. It just said peas, and so I would get to the end of it, and of course they butcher food differently here.
Right.
Yeah.
How so?
Like I didn't know this existed until I came to this part of the world, and I don't know, they just have different butchering styles.
Different cuts of meat.
Different cuts of meat.
Oh, for example, yesterday we had beef cheek, and it's not a normal cut in North America for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you go to the grocery store, there's no steak.
Right.
There's no T-bone steak, no sirloin steak, there's no porterhouse,
Right.
there's no roast beef. Yeah. It's cut in a different way. As I used to joke, it looks like a car hit the cow going really fast, and the cow exploded, and they put it in the display case for me. And so I would get to the end of my shopping basket, and I'd have a beer and a bag of peanuts, because I would just look at this stuff, and it's like
You couldn't figure
it wasn't appetizing, because
Right.
usually when
Yeah.
I look at a can of peas, it makes me happy to have the peas,
Right.
Yeah,
you're right.
and it was like, yeah, okay, well, whatever. I'll go out for dinner again. So it was very, very early days.
Bizarre.
But it was fun. It was fun, of course.
You mentioned a term there that I'm not sure that many people in the audience would understand. Soviet panel building. What does that mean?
So there was in the Soviet Union and in this sphere around the Soviet Union, so in the Warsaw Pact, in order to create a lot of housing very quickly and very cheaply, they built apartment buildings out of precast concrete panels.
Okay.
So that's a concrete panel that you pour in the factory, and it comes out of the factory as a big panel, which is 3 meters by 3 meters.
Like a piece of gyprock. Almost.
Like a piece of gyprock, but it's thick.
Right.
Yeah, and it's made of concrete, and it has some insulation maybe in the center.
Okay.
And so these houses are built like a house of cards, and so each apartment, the floor of each apartment is a different piece of precast, and the wall of each room is a different piece of precast, and the outside wall is a piece of precast, and they just assemble these
Like little cubes.
And from the corners of the panel, the rebar is sticking out of the corner of the panel, the reinforcing steel, and you just tie the reinforcing steel together to hold the panels together, and that's how they're built.
It sounds efficient,
It's efficient, yeah.
and it ends there. Not pretty, but efficient.
Yeah.
Right, and that was the goal, I guess, right?
That was the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was low-cost housing for the masses.
Right.
Yeah,
And
and these buildings are huge. I mean,
Yeah.
you see them. They're
Still today.
10 stories tall, and some of them. There's one in Óbuda. I think it's the longest one in Hungary, and it must be I don't know, 250, 300 meters long. I mean,
Wow.
it's a big thing.
And how many families, Judith, would live in a complex like that?
Thousands.
Really?
Thousands of families.
I wonder what life must have been like for those families. It's one thing to grow up in suburbia, which is a way of growing up,
Yeah.
right? But it must be something to grow up in that. You must have known lots of people that grew up in those.
Yeah, my husband was one of them.
He was one of them, right?
Yeah, he was one of them.
Yeah.
But that, at the time, it wasn't something that, well, it was a community.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of kids were playing together. The parents knew each other. So it wasn't looked at something like horrible.
Right.
When you walk on the street and you see the beauty of Budapest, the building from the Austro-Hungarian era, and then next to it there is this like Soviet creature of a building that was definitely, it was functional, and it's not, the aesthetics was important.
Right. Yeah.
So, but at the time, so many people lived in these buildings that it wasn't, nothing special.
It was normal.
It was a normal
Yeah,
thing.
and to increase the efficiency and to make it faster to build them on site, the bathrooms were fiberglass cabins that also came from a factory with the fixtures already in. So the it's like a bowler trailer
On a ship or something.
Yeah, and so they would build the building, and then there'd be an empty shaft where all the bathrooms went, and they just drop 10 stories of bathrooms into the shaft and connect the plumbing on the back wall of the fiberglass cabin. So you were very closely connected to your neighbors because there was no soundproofing in any direction.
And what's
Up,
amazing,
down, in the bathroom, anywhere. You could hear.
You could hear everything.
Everything,
and what's
all around
amazing that these buildings are still in use.
Yeah,
Right.
So people are living in these
And
buildings.
they have relatively high value.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of them, in the region, like in we were doing a study in Belgrade not too long ago, and these panel buildings, often in Belgrade, are in really prime locations, and so the price of the panel flats is the same as the new flats in the new apartment developments, which are farther out because of the location. So it's not that they have some kind of a stigma that people are like, I mean, it's a product. It's a housing product.
So Bratislava is not very far from Budapest.
Correct.
How did you make the move? What made you to move, or where the journey took you from Bratislava?
So the shopping center project ended. Bratislava was the capital of the newly founded Slovak Republic. Economically, it was a challenge. Of course, there was no investment. People were sort of on the sidelines, wanting to see what was going to happen. But I was very much interested in staying in the region. I was having a good time, and I like Europe, and I like living in Europe, and so during the year that we had been working on the shopping center, we had been doing business development in Budapest and in Prague and in Vienna, in this sort of golden triangle which exists of these three big cities which are very historically interconnected, and I decided that Budapest had the best opportunities for me and for us, and I wanted to stay in the region, and so I decamped to Budapest with my laptop and some business cards, and I came to Budapest.
Still with the same company, or
Still with the same company,
Okay.
yeah, on a very short fuse.
in a very short fuse?
Yeah.
Go figure this out.
Where's Michael? Yeah. Are we paying Michael's salary this month? What is he doing? Yeah. And so I moved to Budapest, and I was fortunate, and I landed my first contract within a number of weeks, which was a door.
A door?
A door, yeah. But, you got to start.
Yeah, I was going to say, they sent you off there to eat what you kill. You didn't kill much on the first one.
No, but so you got to get, every victory is a victory, right? You got to
victory.
celebrate your victories, right?
Small steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a door, and that was
Okay.
my first job was a door, and it was for the Australian embassy
Okay.
in Budapest, and they had received a 50 caliber bullet resistant door in the mail from Canberra with instructions in English of how to install it, and nobody spoke English, and nobody could read the instructions, and nobody knew what to do with it. But somebody heard that there was an architect had come to town who could speak English.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that
was you.
And so I read the instructions about how to install the bulletproof door. And that was my first job.
Does the door exist still?
No.
Oh.
And within another few weeks, by fortune, the property guys from Canberra came because they were leasing a new space, and this door was going in the old embassy, which had a very short shelf life, and so I was able to get the contract to be the architect and the interior architect and the project manager for the new Australian embassy in Budapest,
Wow.
and that saved my
So you took it from the door
yeah.
to building the whole embassy for
Wow.
Yeah, and that kept Calgary quiet for a few months, and
That's a great story. That's a great story. So you arrive in Budapest, beautiful. You had been there obviously before. You had visited. So you pick it up. You start doing work here. What was it about this city that captured you so much? I mean, I can see why it's a beautiful place, but for you personally, what was it?
I mean, obviously the beauty of it, and it's it's such a incredible city. Architecturally, it's wonderful. Historically, it's very interesting. The whole region is very interesting. It all ties together into this, this big picture, and so that was all very, very interesting to me, and the challenge was a big part of it, which was very interesting. It was hard work. I mean, we had to work really hard every day. It wasn't like working in Calgary, where you made some drawings and you went down to the city and you gave the guy the drawings and he gave you the building permit and then you went back to the office. This was hard. Everything was very hard, and the language was hard. How do we deal with the authorities? Where can we find materials? What kind of materials can we find? Everything was just a challenge, and that was very interesting. To go back to Bratislava for a moment, to give an example, when we were designing the shopping center, we went to the fire department in Bratislava, and of course we needed their approval to get the building permit. And so we showed them the drawing, and of course they had never seen a shopping center before, and they never really thought through how this was going to work. And in North America we use fire suppression systems, so we suppress the fire. Yeah. But in the Soviet sphere, it's all containment. You have to contain the fire. Yeah. So you have firewalls everywhere, and these doors shut if the fire breaks out, and you can just keep it there. And so we went to the fire department with this shopping center, and we have this gallery that's 3 stories tall and 500 meters long.
They're thinking, where are the firewalls?
Yeah, and they're looking at it like, and they're like, you can't do that. And we're like, but this is a shopping center, yeah. And this is the future or the present or whatever. Yeah, and they're like, yeah, there's just no way you can do it. The fire breaks out, it's going to spread everywhere and burn down the whole building. And then we sort of clicked, and I said, well, actually, we're going to put in a sprinkler system.
Right.
Yeah. And the sprinklers will pour water on the fire. Like it never occurred to you that you had to actually.
That's unbelievable.
That
right?
people
Yeah.
didn't. That you
Yeah.
were talking about 2 different things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They were talking about one thing, and I was talking about another thing, and so they said a sprinkler system, and the water is going to come from the ceiling, and they're like, you can't do that. Nobody will be able to escape from the fire. They'll slip on the floor and fall down, right? And this was the kind of. Right. This is what you had to deal with, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting.
Yeah.
The challenge of just working every day, and in these.
You must have faced incredible opposition for these, what are fairly normal concepts, bringing them into our market. They must, there's a visionary type stuff, right?
Sure.
To them. That must have been enormous.
Yeah. I mean, in the Australian embassy, I don't know why, but we designed this big curving wall in the reception area, and it was made out of gypsum board. And this was 1994, I guess, when we got onto the construction site, and we had specified it, of course, as a gypsum board wall, and no one could build it. It was not possible to build. I made the contractor knock the wall down 5 times. They just had no idea how to do it. I mean, they'd never built gypsum board before. Never mind curving gypsum board. Yeah. And in the end, it was pretty good. But there was a lot of plaster on the wall to get the final. Get that look. So it just looked like a simple curving wall made of gypsum board. Yeah.
Wow.
So on many levels, and we I guess in about 96, maybe 97, we did the offices for Levi Strauss Hungary, and they had an office here, and this was part of these early days. All these multinationals were coming in and selling blue jeans, right? They had no presence in the marketplace before, so there was a lot of influx, and so we designed this office for Levi Strauss. They had American management. These expats were running and so we designed this big open plan office, right, with some private offices for the senior management, and the staff were like, we're not moving in there. Where's my office? I work in an office. I have an office. I'm Bob. Where's my office? I want to shut the door. And so on the cultural level, they were like, and it was really painful to watch. The management tried to convince their staff that they would still be okay if they sat in an open plan office.
Culture, right? That's a culture shift.
It's a culture shift.
Yeah. That's where architecture collides with culture here, right? I mean, unbelievable.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you were ahead of your time with 25 years, right? Because right through COVID, then we just realized that we want open spaces. We want the ideas flow openly, and then people brainstorming. But at the time, it was more like the private space were sacred.
Yeah.
So there was a challenge also. It was just very dynamic. Yeah. At that time, it was just super dynamic. There was all this change. The economy was changing. The society was changing. There were huge multinational companies coming in and setting up shop where they had no shop before. Budapest Hungary was very much a leading, candidate for being a successful transition in their economy, and there was a lot of NGOs, a lot of embassy, new embassies coming in because people didn't have embassies before, and there was a very large expat community here.
Right.
And so, and everybody was sort of young, and we were all expats, and it was.
Sounds exciting.
It was exciting. Yeah.
And the new hotel chains, which.
New hotel chains. Yeah, the developers came in and started to build the shopping centers, the office buildings. Yeah, all of it.
For an architect, it must be a dream come true.
Yeah, it was.
Like a blank canvas, all these people coming in.
Yeah.
It must have been amazing.
It was amazing. There was lots of competition. There were lots of other architects. We weren't the only architect.
But you had built a door. None of those had built a door, right?
So you had door.
you could come in with the credibility. Look at this door. Michael, we're in the Canadian Embassy here. Beautiful space that we're in. Very, very welcoming.
Thank you.
Very, very warm. It's quite remarkable. The building is beautiful. Beautiful streetscape. You did this?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. This is my building, or the product of my office, my firm, and we started the design in 2002, I think. And we were successful in we had done a fair amount of work for the Canadian government already in Hungary. So we had built some houses for the embassy staff. At one time there was the commercial annex was in a different location than the embassy. We had done the commercial annex. So we had, we had a good relationship, I think, with Ottawa, and so they had a tender, of course. Actually, it was a unique structure. The government the embassy was in a big villa up in the hills, in the Buda Hills. I don't know if you've been there yet, but it's a very beautiful area in the Green Hills, and it was a very inefficient space, an old building. It was corridors and stairs and so they needed a new home, a more sensible home, and so they had a tender for somebody to build a building for them on the back of a 15-year lease. So we will sign a 15-year lease if you build a building to our specifications. That was the tender that was issued by Ottawa, and so there was a couple of Canadian guys here who were developers, and they put in a bid to design the building to hold the embassy, and they asked permission if they could build it twice as big as the embassy, and they secured this lot and then put in their bid. We were the architects for them. Wow. And so we did the shell as a commercial office building. And then the Canadians were 5,000 square meters. So the shell was built, and then there was another tender from Ottawa to do the actual embassy design itself, and so we competed in that, and we were successful in getting that contract. So we built the embassy inside of the commercial shell under a different contract.
Knowing what I do about government contracting, sometimes a government tender might look a little bit like that Soviet building that you described, cubes dropped, washrooms in, and the like. Yeah. Walk me through how a government tender can inspire an architect to create this beautiful space, because the two don't match necessarily. One is very scripted, whereas you're very creative.
So I think, as all good architects and designers, we try to push the envelope as far as we can, and to maximize what we can create, hopefully within the budget. Yeah, because if you can't keep the budget, then your career maybe not last very long. So it's just maximizing what you can do, and we had some opportunities, like in anything, I guess you try to put the money where it's the most visible. So we have representative spaces. This is a representative space. Obviously, it's the Canada Room. It's the function room of the embassy, and we have this beautiful slate here on the floor, and we have Canadian. This is actual Canadian maple wall panels. We have a custom Canadian maple acoustical ceiling. So it's an attempt to put the money where it's most visible, where you can see it. We have that big glass stair in the front with the elevator, and then the remainder of the spaces do what they need to do. But it is an institutional object, and so it has high wear and tear, and you need to specify good quality carpets, because you don't want to replace them a year from now, and the doors are very solid doors with very solid institutional hardware. And you know, and the embassy here has taken such good care of this building. I mean, it looks incredible, right? I mean, this building was occupied in 2005.
Yeah. 2005.
Yeah, and
It still has the new car smell.
yeah, I know. It's great. It's really held up well.
Yeah.
So hopefully you can, you know, your specifications will
Last.
last.
And in many respects, that is a legacy, isn't it, right? That it can do that.
Yeah.
It's amazing how functionality, aesthetics, Canadian identity, and comes together and marries in this building.
Yeah, 100%. Michael, so you've been here a while. You've made a life here. Tell me about what it is to be in Hungary, to be in Budapest. Why should people come here? You know, it's misunderstood for many people. They look at it, well, why would I go to Hungary? They know Budapest by name, but that's about it. They think it's a complex place to visit. Tell us about why it's not.
Sure.
Because it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, I mean, it's from a tourism standpoint, it's of course one of the most beautiful cities anywhere. You know, we have the Buda Hills, we have the castle hanging over the Danube. We have Pest on the other side of the river with these big 19th century boulevards and big squares and it's just a very pretty place. Yeah, it's a very nice city. It's easy to get around. And a friend of mine, a very old friend of mine from Calgary, came a few weeks ago with his partner, and oddly he'd never been here before, and he was here for 4 days, and and we just sort of rolled out this standard, tried and tested Budapest itinerary. Yeah, we'll go to the castle, we'll go to the bath, we'll go to the opera, we'll walk up in the Buda Hills, we'll walk around the downtown. And you know, you've lived here for a long time and you kind of take it for granted, and it's like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And you think, well, I got to find something new to do, and it's like, why am I finding something new to do? He's never been here before,
Right.
yeah? And so you just roll out the old itinerary,
Yeah.
and it was just so much fun. I mean, they just had so much fun, and in 4 days, you know, we still had another 20 things that we just hadn't gotten to. So the city itself is fantastic. The countryside is also very interesting. Lots of big hills on the north and south sides of the country, and the big plain in the middle, Balaton Lake, which is a very popular destination. Lots of cycling, lots of hiking. Lots of water sports. Water sports are very big to Hungarians, of course. Sailing, rowing, canoeing, swimming. So it's from a tourism standpoint. I think it's just a great place to visit.
Business-wise?
Business-wise, the location is very good. So we are in a EU member state. Yeah. So we're inside of the European Union, which allows a Hungarian entity to trade freely with all the other EU member states. Yeah. So you have access into, which I think is the largest common market on earth, right? The European Union.
Yeah.
Right.
So you have Germany, you have France, used to have the UK, but they left. And so great access into a huge trading block. I wouldn't say from the back door, but from a map standpoint, it sort of looks that way. There's a lot of multinational companies here, and a lot of Hungary has a big manufacturing base. So the automotive sector is very big. Audi, Mercedes,
Wow.
BMW is now building in Debrecen, Opel, Suzuki. So each of those manufacturers then attract all of their suppliers, so all of their parts. Right. Yeah, and so it creates a very big market sector. There's a lot of electronics manufacturing, and now this automotive sector is going through a rebirth because of the electric vehicles. So
of course,
there's a lot of new suppliers coming into the market who weren't present before, who make components that are specific to the electric vehicles. There's a lot of administrative offices for multinationals. Right. So Goldman Sachs, Exxon, Diageo have very big back office administrative operations here with thousands of employees. Wow. So they have needs that are to be serviced. So it's very international, and I think it's positioned itself reasonably well.
It sounds like a wonderful place to visit and a wonderful place to do business as well. You started off the podcast and you said one of the things that, when you described yourself was that you were a proud father of 3 young men. Mm-hmm. Tell us quickly about them.
Sure. So I'm a father of three beautiful boys. Who were born and raised in Hungary. And my former wife and I met not too long after I relocated. So I guess I skipped over. There was a girl in the story there.
Yep.
Somewhere, of course, as there always is. And so we have three boys born in 1995, and the twins were born in 1997. Wow. They were brought up here. And they went in the Hungarian school system, which is a very tough environment. I was a product of suburban Calgary, right? I don't think I ever did homework, ever, once. Yeah, I think I got all the way through high school without doing homework, and the Hungarian school system is really hard. It's based on the German system. Okay. It's memorization, and theory. and I remember David. So the schools go from grade 1 to grade 8, and then from 9 to 12, basically. Some schools kind of overlap, but so we lived in this village just outside the city, and we wanted to get David into a better school downtown after grade 4 was the first time he could move, and after grade 3, David had to write a 2-hour written examination, and if his score was higher than 76%, he had to go to a 1-hour interview. And it was like in grade 3, right? And
He's 8 years old?
Yeah, and I'm like, what? It's like, wow, and he was successful, and he got through, but just really, really hard. So we grew up as many, mixed families did. We had 2 languages in the house, right? We had English and Hungarian. We had our own theory about how that was supposed to work. Every family had their own theory, yeah. Our own theory, a lot of it born out of necessity, was that I only spoke English to the children. Mm-hmm. That's the necessity part. And then my wife only spoke Hungarian to the children, and it was a hard and fast rule. And if Dad was in the house, then everybody spoke English. And my other rule was that you could only watch programming in the language in which it was created. And we had a cable TV system, which still exists here, and you can change the language on the TV. So it was absolutely forbidden to watch Discovery Channel dubbed into another language. Yeah, you had to watch. You had to watch it in English, because it was made in English, and so the kids had good English, spoken English skills.
Yeah.
And they did, they did quite well at school. They're good students, and they did Hungarian traditional folk dancing for many years. It was a big thing in our village was the folk dance. They played soccer. They were in football. They were on the local soccer team, and of course we liked to ski a lot. So we'd spend a lot of time in Austria skiing. Wow. And but I had always wanted to give my kids more of a Canadian identity as well. Mm-hmm. So they have the good Hungarian, European base, but what does it mean, to be half Canadian? And so in 2012, we moved to Canada, and we took the kids. They had never been to school in English one day in their life. David was going into grade 11, and the twins were going into grade 8. And so we moved back to Calgary, I went back to Calgary. We're not going back to Calgary, and we put them into school, and they did really well.
Nice. No homework.
Because they knew how to work.
Right,
yeah,
of course.
They knew how to work hard, and that's what and they had this sense of discipline from their educational background, and we were the most popular parents at the parent teachers night. Yeah? They were like, "Your children are angels. How did you do that?"
Hungarian schools.
Oh yeah, I did myself. Yeah,
that's right. Where are they now?
Yeah. So David graduated from UBC from business school. He's got a commerce degree from UBC, and he lives in Vancouver with his partner. He is the senior manager for network planning for Flair Airlines.
Wow.
So he's very interested in aviation.
Yeah.
Always has been. And after graduating, he graduated 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And he worked for an aviation consulting firm in Vancouver for a while, and then Flair did that big expansion a year and a half ago.
Right.
And so they hired David because now they have 18 airplanes and not 3.
Yeah.
And so he needs some network planning, and so he does network planning for them. And the twins are both in engineering school. Adam is also at UBC. He's in materials engineering.
Okay, yeah.
And Tom is at Waterloo, and he's in mechanical engineering.
Right.
They're both in the co-op program,
okay.
And that's just a really, really great program.
Good experience and learning there for sure.
And so they've been working everywhere. Tom, in his mechanical degree, did a stint in Apple headquarters in Cupertino, also in Tesla headquarters. Last spring and summer, he had a work term in Stockholm, working for Northvolt, which is also an electronics supplier.
Yeah.
Adam has worked largely in the construction industry because he's in materials engineering. So he's been working for PCL construction and WSP engineers in Vancouver or Calgary, doing materials testing on construction sites.
Yeah.
But he also has had a position in Freiburg, Germany, at the University of Freiburg, working in the lab at the university, doing materials related testing, and he will be finished. Adam graduates, this is his last semester at UBC, and he's coming back to Germany in January and going back to the University of Freiburg to continue working there. And Tom will finish in the spring.
Wow.
Michael, we've come a long way from Assiniboia, Saskatchewan here today. What a journey.
Yeah.
What a beautiful story, beautiful family.
Thank you.
Doing wonderful things. Beautiful building we're sitting in that you created.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for allowing us into your life for these few short moments. Tell us about
My pleasure.
Budapest and helping people understand why it's so important to come here, touch and feel it. You might never leave.
Exactly.
Case in point.
Exactly.
What do you think, Judith?
Well, it's amazing. I'm so inspired by it. And I think Hungarians are so lucky to have Michael here and design these beautiful buildings and build these beautiful buildings that will last, I don't know, decades, even centuries. So someone in 100 years will walk by the street and they will see these buildings that he...
They'll point up and they'll say, Michael Cojocar built that
Sure
building.
they will. Sure they
That's
will.
right.
You
That's
can
what they're
hope,
gonna
you
say.
can hope, yeah. Thank you.
Exactly. What
What
a
does,
legacy.
what does the world need more of, Judith?
More of Michael Cojocar.
There you go.
There you go. Thank you so much. It's
Thank
been a real
you.
pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Wins. That's Gale Force Wins, WINS.com.